from serving as the last person to hold the title district governor, celebrating the loss of a club, and how the word apricot changed his direction in Toastmasters. Here is past district director and current R63 area director, David Widner, with Better from Toastmasters, not better at Toastmasters.
Thank you, Mr. Program Quality Director. Fellow Toastmasters, happy anniversary. I'm really bad at Toastmasters, and that's why I've chosen not to renew. It was a really disappointing email, but not entirely surprising. This was somebody who had been a charter member of the club that brought me into Toastmasters, and I knew that he had struggled. He'd never felt particularly comfortable presenting in front of the group, and he'd never really developed much confidence in many of the meeting roles. Still, when he chose to leave the club, he left behind a box of fantastic materials from his service in some of the different officer roles with the club. Detailed accounting from his term as the club treasurer, and a spectacular new member kit, printed in full color with statistics and branded materials. It was amazing, and I was thrilled. But the fact remains, he didn't feel that he was good at Toastmasters, but it provided him with a way to explore how to be a better person through Toastmasters and to explore his real gifts. I suppose the question really that we want to know is, why did I join Toastmasters? It's a question that all of us have had to ask ourselves repeatedly. And why do we stay in Toastmasters? For me, I joined because I had a lot of bad habits when I talked to people. I had known about Toastmasters for about 15 years before I ever visited a club. When I talked to people, they'd focus in on me. They'd say, "David, look here, look here. Look at me when you're talking to me." Or they would notice that I dropped in a lot of filler words, or that I would fidget when I talked to them, and I would look away, and I would fidget, and I'd shuffle around. Ultimately, I even had a boss who he'd ask me for updates on what was going on in the office, and I would tell him, he'd go, okay, yeah. I go, okay, get to the point, I get it. Finally, 17 years ago, I walked into my very first Toastmasters meeting, and I needed something positive in my life at that point. The license plates had been stolen off of my car. I was about to be laid off from my job. My house was broken into. And on top of all of that, I was turning 40. Wow, there was a lot that was awkward in my life, and I needed something positive that was going to reaffirm who I was and who I hoped to be beyond the age of 40. Well, sure enough, on my 40th birthday, that club met, and we signed up the last person we needed to charter that club. A lot of people say life begins at 40, and for me, in a way, my life began anew on that 40th birthday. As the club formed, we needed to recruit some officers, and I agreed to be the sergeant-at-arms. I was voluntold to be the sergeant-at-arms for that club. And I realized that's instrumental to who I became as a person. As anybody here who has been voluntold into a position, there are 3 stages to it. Somebody tells you, you'd be good at this. You should do this. And the third, and perhaps most important, I will help you. That is how we provide feedback, by feeding back the most important support that we can provide to people. Now, beyond volunteering to get people into leadership positions and to participate, I have 3 tips that I'm going to offer to you today on leadership and getting better beyond Toastmasters. Those 3 are when to say yes, when to say no, and when to say nothing. At a DEC meeting a couple of months after I ended my term as the district governor, we went around the room to discuss, to solicit the people who had served as district officers the previous year for what they had learned from that experience. I was standing at the very back of the room, and so I had some time to think about it. And we had some fantastic responses from people who had been area directors and had been division directors and had chosen to stay in district leadership, district officer roles for that coming year. There were some great responses. Find a team to work with. Manage your time. Don't be afraid to ask questions. All sorts of great responses, and I was probably not going to be able to top any of those. I realized I was going to have to say something, and so in my characteristically glib way, I said, learn to say no, learn to say yes, learn to say no, and know when to say nothing. I didn't think there was much substance to that, but as I've thought about it over these 7 years or so, I realized there was something to that. And so I'm going to share with you what it means, the importance of saying yes. My first step into a district officer role came by accident because of the word apricot, or rather the absence of the word apricot. I had decided to compete in the international speech contest, and I had a speech I loved, my Jell-O speech, in which I described the process for building this 7-flavor, 13-layer gelatin dessert. And I drew comparisons between that and the Toastmasters program. That with every layer, every step, you gained more color and more flavor. And with all of that, as the higher that you reached, the more flexibility you gained. I thought that this was brilliant. I took this to the area contest, and as I listed the flavors, I meant the flavors that I had put into the recipe for this special occasion. I tested and I had played around with the flavors. I got to the word apricot, and it vanished from my vocabulary. I stumbled for a moment. I tried to think of any other flavor that I might have mentioned. Nothing. I recaptured my bearings, and I continued. I finished the speech, but was pretty sure I was not on the fast track to the World Championship of Public Speaking as a result. I sat down, and with my second place trophy, and a friend of mine who was going to be a division director the following year asked me, well, would you consider being an area director with me? I said, yes. I said yes. And it was all because I couldn't remember the word apricot. 10 years ago, I was at one of our district conferences, and over the course of the months leading up to that, people had told me, you might want to consider taking another step in district leadership. I thought I would kind of blow it off. But I arrived at this district conference. I had just checked in. I was on my way into breakfast. And a friend of mine in district leadership spotted me. David Whitner, I have someone I want you to meet. She ushered this gentleman over. I don't think he even introduced himself. Don't think he shook my hand. He didn't ask me, how are you doing? Anything. I understand you're running for Lieutenant Governor Marketing. I'm thinking about it. Are you thinking about it? Or are you committed? I'm committed. I had not even eaten breakfast, and by dinner time, I was the incoming club growth director. I knew at that point that by taking that role, and the subsequent roles, program quality director, district director, wow, I was going to have to take some risks. And I knew that in that process, on that journey, I was probably going to disappoint some people. I would meet some controversy. And I knew that there were some big things that I was going to have to take on, but I had to remain humble. I had to remain focused. And I knew that regardless of what my role was, whether I was a club officer or a district officer or a DTM, regardless of what I took on, the badge didn't get any bigger. There were some things I had to learn through this process, and one of those was to learn to say no. When to say no? It's important that we recognize our obligations to ourselves and to our clubs at the most basic, essential, and personal level. And sometimes that's when we have to say no. Only a couple of weeks ago, I received invitations from 2 clubs just within the last month asking me to visit them for some special events that they had. Well, so it just happened that both of those events conflicted with the meetings of the 2 clubs of which I am a member. This was one way that I had, and by telling them no, I had to demonstrate one of the core values of this organization. I had to demonstrate integrity by saying no. As much as I would love to have supported those events, I had to stay true to the clubs that I am a member of. And yes, of course we have to say no. We have to say no to protect ourselves and our clubs and our values. When I was an area director, the very first time, about 12 years ago, I was on one of my club visits, and I reminded the members, hey, the club officer training is coming up. TLI is next Saturday. And before the words were even out of my mouth, one of the officers piped in, I'm too busy. And I was a little taken aback by that. But then I realized, of course, he's got other priorities. Toastmasters isn't everything in life, as much as some of us may think to the contrary. I realized out of that a very important lesson. It's the people who are not busy we have to worry about. It's the people who are not busy, the people who have not announced their priorities, their child's ballet class, their kid's soccer game, their family reunions, their home renovations, whatever that may be. We have to respect that. Another core value of Toastmasters. And respect that those people have priorities above Toastmasters. And perhaps, best case scenario, they can take those priorities, take that experience from Toastmasters to enrich every other element of their lives. Sometimes in learning to say no, it is reminding ourselves that it's important to know when to say no longer. This was a huge issue for me. The club that brought me into Toastmasters meant everything to me. It was arguably the most important thing I've ever been part of in my life. I was a charter member. I remained the only charter member through the entire lifespan of that club. But shortly after the club chartered, our membership started to dwindle. The demographic to which we had targeted this club, built this club, bore this club, largely ignored and avoided us. Many of the people for whom that club was built couldn't care less if we didn't care that we were around. They couldn't have cared less if they had tried. For every person, there were plenty of people who would say, "That's awesome. We need that. I am so there." And yet, very few of them ever put on their shoes and socks to come see us. After 12 years, we, as the remaining members of the club, got together and we decided we need to let this end. It is time to say no longer. But instead of just cutting ourselves loose, we decided we are going to celebrate what we have achieved. The achievements, we had 3 people who got DTMs out of that club. We had been distinguished, we had been select distinguished, we had achieved so much, and we weren't just going to give that up, we weren't going to throw that away. So we had one last club office, one last club event. And I invited people, past members, and friends of mine who'd known about the club but had never visited. And I invited a lot of people who had been a lot of people from across the district. And in the email I sent to many of these other Toastmasters from across District 22, one of them wrote back, "Maybe I misread your email, but why would you celebrate the end of a Toastmasters club?" And it's important that we remind ourselves that everything that we gain from Toastmasters enriches our lives, and we can't just dismiss that. And I had to remind him of that, and I still have to remind myself of that, even though it's been almost 5 years since we closed that club. But I also have to remind myself not to whine about that loss. Devastating though it was for me personally, after I put so much of my life force into that, most of the burden of sustaining that club had rested on my shoulders. It was a personal loss for me, but I couldn't afford to let that poison everything else in my life. I had to learn to say no more about that. I had to remind myself that third step. Learn to say nothing. When we join Toastmasters, we have to attune ourselves to a lot of different listening skills. I'll counter. Keep a track of all of those ums and uhs and anyways, especially the ones that come out of my mouth. And we have to pay close attention to the speeches while we're timing them. And as we are preparing what we want to say in response as we evaluate those. That's part of listening and knowing when to say nothing in the course of a Toastmasters meeting. And yet, even more, just as important, one of the things that we pursue as members of Toastmasters is the value of the mentoring process. We have people who mentor, who continue to mentor, and one of the most important things that you can do as a mentor is just listen. You don't have to give a lot of advice. I probably wouldn't be the first person to say that many times the people who are most eager to give advice are among the least qualified. From those people that we mentor, we have so much to learn. One of the people I've mentored was a very quiet young man. He had arrived at our club meeting site early. He was there before anyone else, and he was just sitting by himself in the room. I arrived. I introduced myself, and he shared why he had sought this club. And so we prepared the space. I helped him, and at the next meeting, he joined the club, and he grew through it. He went on to be an area director and a division director. And after 5 years, I sat quietly at one of our district conferences and saw him receive his recognition as a distinguished Toastmaster. And it was one of the proudest moments of my life to know that I had gotten to usher somebody through that journey, that I was part of that. And I was prouder of him in that moment than I was of myself when I received that distinction. If you have mentored somebody, even through a few speeches, through a level, through a competent communication manual, or through to distinguished Toastmaster, there is something thrilling and enriching about that. Certainly, I joined Toastmasters because I had a lot of bad habits when I talked to people. I was not a very good communicator. But mentoring and receiving feedback, being fed back, and allowing that to absorb has been a huge benefit to me. I came into this program with granular self-esteem, but the evaluation process that I have witnessed, I have experienced, and from which I have benefited so richly, has sustained me. And that's part of what keeps me in this program. I've had a lot of people who have mentored me, a lot of people who have listened, who have said nothing. But they have also said yes. Some of them have said no. And some of them knew the value of listening by saying nothing. Many people have mentored me and known when to say nothing. And through their wisdom, through their actions, and their abundant patience, I have benefited tremendously. And I am privileged. I am profoundly honored and deeply humbled that I get to speak to you today on the 98th anniversary of this amazing organization that has instilled in me discipline that I never had. And there are a lot of people I have to thank for that, who have guided me and been shown immense patience with me. And a couple of those people are here, and some of them have moved on from Toastmasters. But I'm going to list a few of them for you. Annette Rudy, Kim Myers, Michael Hobbs, Marilyn Schwartz, Rob Christensen, April Hendrickson, Jim Christine, John Mulroy, David McAllister, Jack Mackey, Ken McClendon, Joanne Monroe, Clarice Maysberg, Stephanie Schrader, happy birthday, by the way, Rhonda Green, Fred Washington, Paul McDonald, Linda Williams, and your current district trio, Jerome Montgomery, David Wooten, and your district director, Ched Mayberry. These people have been mentors to me, and they will continue to serve you as members of this district. For those of you keeping count, you may have noticed how many names I listed. I listed 22 people who have supported me, and there are so many more. When I served as your district director, I adopted as our slogan for the season, for that year, True to 22. Our District 22, we support a whole tapestry of values. The Toastmasters core values of support, of integrity, respect, service, and excellence. And those are the values that many of us continue to celebrate as members of our clubs, as members of our district, and perhaps most important, as members of those entities of which we are a member, of which we are members elsewhere in our lives, whether it is in the workplace, in your place of worship, in your volunteer activities, so many ways that we continue to serve. So when you are true to your values, you are true to the values of this organization. And when you live your life and you serve your life with integrity, with respect, with service and excellence, you are not simply true to Toastmasters. You are true to 22. You are true to yourself. Again, nobody joins Toastmasters to become a better Toastmaster. You don't go into a job interview and somebody asks, so, are you really good at timing speeches? How many ums can you count in a minute? None of that. It is the skills that we develop as members of Toastmasters and how we can take that into the rest of our lives. And it's the ultimate goal. It's not to be a better Toastmaster, not to be better at Toastmasters, but better through Toastmasters. To be a better communicator, a better neighbor, a better member of your faith community, a better spouse, a better sibling, a better parent, a better coworker, a better contributor to society. Ultimately, it's to be better citizens. We are blessed to have each other, And it has been a thrill to be part of this organization for 17 years. And I'm looking forward to seeing what I can share with you as we continue this journey together for these next 17 years. And what these last 98 years have offered us as members of this organization, and what the next 98 years may offer. And as we move into the second century of communication and leadership and enriching the lives of ourselves, not just within our clubs, not just within our district, but throughout our lives, I am tremendously fortunate, and I look forward to sharing that value with all of you. So thank you for being part of District 22. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for supporting your fellow Toastmasters. And thank you for enriching your own lives, because by doing so, you are enriching the lives of your neighbors, your coworkers, your friends, your family, everyone, every life that you touch. Perhaps a little bit of this skill that you have developed in Toastmasters will shine through in other parts of your life. I thank you for being not just making yourselves better Toastmasters, but being better citizens. Back to you, Mr. Program Quality Director.
Thank you. Let's everyone give a round of applause.